Listen carefully. The fastest way to lose your power is to keep handing your emotions to people, problems, and opinions that do not deserve them. This book is about taking that power back. Not caring does not mean becoming cold, lazy, or disconnected. It means becoming unshakable. It means refusing to waste energy on disrespect, noise, drama, rejection, and fear. The person who wins is not the person who feels the most. The person who wins is the person who stays focused when everyone else gets distracted. If you can master what gets your attention, your reaction, and your energy, you can master your life. Chapter 1. Stop reacting to everything. Most people are not in control of their lives. They are in control of their schedules sometimes, their appearance sometimes, their words sometimes, but not their reactions. And that is why they stay weak. A single comment ruins their mood. A delayed text hijacks their focus. A rude coworker steals an entire afternoon. A stranger's opinion lives in their head rent-free for hours. Sometimes days. Sometimes years. That is not power. That is dependence. You need to understand this from the beginning. Reaction is surrender. Every time something small pulls you off your center, it proves one thing. The outside world still has a direct line into your mind. It can press a button and move you like a machine. If it controls your reaction, it controls your life. That is not an exaggeration. That is the rule. The person who angers you controls you. The person who distracts you controls you. The person who can bait you into proving yourself controls you. The inconvenience that breaks your rhythm controls you. You have a choice. You can keep living like that, pulled in every direction by every opinion, every inconvenience, every emotional impulse. Or you can become someone who does not move unless the mission requires movement. That's the key. This chapter is not about becoming cold. It is not about pretending you feel nothing. It is not about becoming robotic. It is about discipline. Emotional discipline. Attention discipline. Behavioral discipline. It's not about feeling less. It's about reacting less. That is the difference. A weak person reacts first and thinks later. A strong person pauses first and chooses later. That pause is power. And most people never train it. They think emotional control is a personality trait. They think some people are just naturally calm, naturally detached, naturally focused. Wrong. Calm is trained. Detachment is trained. Focus is trained. Silence is trained. You don't rise into emotional control by accident. You build it through repetition, through awareness, through refusing to obey every impulse the moment it appears. Let's make it real. Your coworker sends a disrespectful message. Your ego says, respond now. Correct them now. Put them in their place now. But what usually happens when you obey that impulse? You lose time. You lose clarity. You lose momentum. Now your body is tense. Your mind is spinning. You replay the message. You draft the perfect comeback. You start working less and stewing more. They sent one message, but you turned it into a full emotional event. Why? Because you reacted. Not every trigger deserves a response. Read that again in your mind. Not every trigger deserves a response. That rude message may deserve strategy. It may deserve documentation. It may deserve a boundary later. But it does not deserve your immediate emotional surrender. You have a choice. The same is true when an ex posts something obviously designed to get attention. A picture, a caption, a performance, and suddenly your mind is gone. You analyze it. You personalize it. You imagine what it means. You start building stories. You start feeding emotions that should have been starved. Why? Because someone outside you still knows how to get inside you. If it controls your reaction, it controls your life. A stranger online says something stupid. A family member makes a passive-aggressive comment. Someone cuts you off in traffic. Someone doesn't invite you. Someone delays a reply. Someone doubts you. Someone misunderstands you. And now the whole day is contaminated. This is how energy gets stolen. Not through one giant disaster. Through 1,000 tiny leaks. That is how most people lose. Not all at once. Gradually. Repeatedly. Silently. One reaction at a time. They wake up with goals, but spend the day reacting. They want peace, but feed chaos. They want progress, but hand their attention to nonsense. Then they wonder why they feel drained. You are drained because you are available to everything. That's the truth. You answer every bait. You absorb every mood. You chase every misunderstanding. You fight every small battle as if your identity depends on it. But it doesn't. You don't need their permission. You don't need the last word. You don't need to attend every argument you are invited to. You do not need to react just because something touched your ego. That's the key. Here is the standard you need to build. Before you respond to anything, ask one ruthless question. Does this matter to my mission? Not to your ego. Not to your pride. Not to your temporary emotion. To your mission. Does this help your health? Does this help your work? Does this help your peace? Does this help your future? Does this help you build the life you say you want? If the answer is no, then your response should usually be one of three things: silence, distance, or indifference. Silence, distance, indifference. These are not signs of weakness. They are signs of selection. You are selecting what gets access to your energy. That is maturity. That is self-respect. That is control. Now be careful. This is where people confuse suppression with discipline. Suppression means you feel something and bury it badly, then it leaks later in uglier ways. Discipline means you feel it, name it, understand it, and choose not to obey it blindly. Huge difference. You can feel anger without becoming anger. You can feel embarrassment without collapsing into embarrassment. You can feel disappointment without turning the whole day into defeat. You have a choice. Feeling is human. Obeying every feeling is immaturity. That needs to be repeated. Feeling is human. Obeying every feeling is immaturity. So what do you do in real life? First, slow the moment down. When triggered, do not speak immediately. Do not text immediately. Do not post immediately. Do not explain immediately. Create space. Even 30 seconds matters. Even one deep breath matters. Even leaving the room matters. Why? Because time weakens impulse. Second, name what is happening. Say it clearly in your mind. I am triggered. My ego wants to react. I feel disrespected. I want to defend myself. Naming it breaks the trance. Third, return to the question. Does this matter to my mission? If it does matter, respond with strategy. Calmly. Deliberately. Without emotional leakage. If it does not matter, let it die. That is strength. Fourth, stop glorifying reactivity. Some people think being explosive means being real. It doesn't. It means being undisciplined. Some people think instant expression means confidence. It doesn't. Often it means fragility. If every little thing gets a rise out of you, you are not powerful. You are available. It's not about expression, it's about discipline. That's the key. The strongest people in any room are usually not the loudest, not the quickest, not the most emotionally dramatic. They are the hardest to move. They can hear criticism without folding. They can face disrespect without losing posture. They can experience delay without panic. They can be misunderstood without performing for acceptance. They remain centered. And because they remain centered, they remain effective. That is the goal. Not to look calm. To be calm. Not to seem unbothered. To become unbothered by what never deserved your energy in the first place. Remember this, every unnecessary reaction is proof that something trivial still has authority over you. Take that authority back. Guard your mind. Guard your state. Guard your attention. Not every trigger deserves a response. If it controls your reaction, it controls your life. So starting today, stop asking, how do I express everything I feel? Start asking, what deserves my energy? That question will save you years. You do not need to react to every insult. You do not need to answer every fool. You do not need to chase every misunderstanding. You do not need their permission. You need discipline. Because the moment you stop reacting to everything is the moment you stop being controlled by everything. And once you stop being controlled, you can finally focus. You reclaim your power by reclaiming your response. That is where emotional control begins. That is where freedom begins. That is where winning begins. You have mastered the first gate, the space between stimulus and response. Now let's go deeper, because controlling your reactions is only the beginning. The next trap is even more common, even more seductive, and even more expensive. Chapter 2. The silent cost of seeking validation. Most people do not live by principle. They live by reaction. And underneath that reaction is something even more dangerous. Approval. Validation. Permission. They want to be liked. They want to be accepted. They want to be praised. They want to be understood by everyone in the room before they move. That is not freedom. That is dependence wearing nice clothes. The need to be liked is expensive. It costs confidence. It costs honesty. It costs time. It costs courage. It costs your real life. You need to see validation seeking for what it is. Not a harmless habit. Not a soft little insecurity. Not a personality quirk. It is a hidden addiction. And like every addiction, it makes you weak, needy, and easy to control. If somebody else has the power to approve you, they also have the power to withhold approval. And once they can withhold it, they can shape your behavior. They can make you soften your words, hide your standards, delay your decisions, betray your instincts. That is how people become manageable. That is how people lose themselves. When you need permission, you lose power. That's the key. You may not say it out loud. You may not even realize you are doing it. But every time you wait for applause before you act, you hand over authority. Every time you need a room to agree with your direction before you move, you prove that your compass is external. And an external compass will always fail you. Because people change. Crowds change. Trends change. Opinions change. What gets praised today gets mocked tomorrow. What gets accepted in one room gets rejected in the next room. If your identity depends on approval, your identity will always be unstable. You have a choice. You can build a life around your values. Or you can build a life around everybody else's comfort. One path leads to self-respect. The other leads to performance. And most people are performing. Look at how they speak. They over-explain simple decisions. They say no, then write a paragraph to make sure no one feels uncomfortable. They choose what to wear, what to post, what to say, what to pursue, and even who to love based on how it will be received. Not on whether it is right. On whether it will be approved. That is the trap. A person who over-explains is often not communicating. They are negotiating for acceptance. A person who constantly checks if everyone is okay with their decision is often not being thoughtful. They are afraid of disapproval. A person who cannot make a move without announcing it first usually does not want advice. They want reassurance. And reassurance can become a drug. The need to be liked is expensive. Say it again. The need to be liked is expensive. It costs you the strength to disappoint people. And if you cannot disappoint people, you cannot lead your own life. That sentence matters. If you cannot disappoint people, you cannot lead your own life. Because every meaningful life requires difficult decisions. Every real standard excludes somebody. Every serious boundary inconveniences somebody. Every major goal will confuse, threaten, or alienate somebody who benefited from your smaller version. You have a choice. You can stay digestible, or you can become honest. You can stay acceptable, or you can become effective. It's not about being liked, it's about being aligned. That's the key. Let's make it practical. You want to change careers, but your family does not understand it, so you keep delaying. You want to start a business, but your friends might think you are unrealistic, so you keep talking instead of moving. You want to end a relationship that drains you, but you do not want to look like the bad person, so you stay and bleed slowly. You want to stop people-pleasing, but you are terrified someone might call you selfish, so you keep saying yes while resentment grows in silence. This is what validation seeking does. It does not always destroy your life dramatically. Sometimes it destroys your life politely, quietly, respectably. One compromise at a time. One swallowed truth at a time. One delayed decision at a time. Approval is not progress. Read that again in your mind. Approval is not progress. Just because people clap does not mean you are growing. Just because people agree does not mean you are right. Just because people are comfortable with your choices does not mean those choices are serving your future. Sometimes approval is actually a warning sign. Why? Because people often praise the version of you that is easiest for them to use. The agreeable version. The available version. The smaller version. The non-threatening version. The version that asks for nothing and disrupts nothing. Of course that version gets approval. It is convenient. But convenience is not purpose. You don't need their permission. You do not need permission to change. You do not need permission to outgrow a role. You do not need permission to become harder to manipulate. You do not need permission to become more disciplined, more private, more focused, more selective. You need clarity. And then you need the courage to act on that clarity without begging the room to bless it. That's the key. Now look at social media. One of the greatest validation machines ever built. People post not to express, but to be confirmed. They share not to connect, but to be seen. They reveal not because it is wise, but because silence makes them feel invisible. And then what happens? A post performs well, and they feel valuable. A post performs badly, and they feel diminished. A few people approve, and they feel confident. A few people ignore them, and they spiral. That is not confidence. That is emotional outsourcing. Your worth cannot rise and fall with audience response. If strangers can inflate you, strangers can destroy you. When you need permission, you lose power. This is why so many people stay stuck. Their actions are filtered through anticipated judgment. Before they make a move, they ask, "How will this look? Will they approve? Will they still like me? Will this upset anyone?" Wrong questions. Ask better questions. Is this true? Is this necessary? Is this aligned? Is this helping me become who I need to become? Those questions build a life. Approval does not. And let's talk about relationships, because this is where validation hunger becomes especially costly. Some people stay in dead relationships because rejection scares them more than misery. They would rather be chosen badly than stand alone with dignity. They would rather be tolerated than released. They would rather shrink themselves to keep someone than lose someone and keep themselves. That is what addiction to approval does. It makes scraps feel sacred. But scraps are still scraps. You have a choice. You can stay where you are merely accepted. Or you can walk away and build a life where you are respected. It's not about attachment, it's about standards. That's the key. Self-respect grows every time you make a hard choice without requiring unanimous understanding. That line matters too. Self-respect grows every time you make a hard choice without requiring unanimous understanding. You tell the truth even if it disappoints someone. You set the boundary even if it changes the dynamic. You leave the draining environment even if others call you difficult. You pursue the bigger goal even if nobody claps at the beginning. That is how self-respect is built. Not by being admired, by being internally solid. So here is the behavioral instruction. Stop auditioning. Stop explaining every boundary. Stop softening every truth. Stop packaging yourself for wider acceptance. Stop checking the crowd before obeying your conscience. Create internal standards. Decide what kind of person you are. Decide what you tolerate. Decide what you pursue. Decide what you refuse to become for approval. Then live by that. Quietly. Consistently. Without theatrics. And when people do not understand, let them not understand. When people do not approve, let them not approve. When people pull back because you stopped performing for their comfort, let them pull back. That is not loss. That is filtration. The need to be liked is expensive. Approval is not progress. When you need permission, you lose power. Repeat those until they become instinct. Because the moment you stop asking the world for constant confirmation is the moment you start becoming dangerous in the best way. Focused. Decisive. Calm. Unavailable for manipulation. You stop being led by applause. You start being led by principle. And that is what this book is about. Not becoming numb. Becoming free. Free from reaction. Free from validation. Free from the exhausting need to have your existence approved before you live it. You have taken back your need for applause. Now you are ready for an even deeper level of freedom, the ability to move forward without being explained correctly, praised correctly, or seen correctly. Chapter 3. Let people misunderstand you. One of the most expensive habits in life is the need to be understood by everyone. It sounds innocent. It sounds reasonable. It sounds mature. But most of the time, it is fear. Fear of judgment. Fear of rejection. Fear of looking wrong. Fear of losing control of the story. And that fear keeps people trapped. They explain too much. They defend too often. They clarify every boundary. They panic when someone misreads their intent. They exhaust themselves trying to manage perception instead of building reality. That is weakness. Not because communication is weak, but because obsession with being understood is dependence. You need to hear the truth. Being misunderstood is often the price of growth. Read that again in your mind. Being misunderstood is often the price of growth. The moment you change, someone will misread it. The moment you become disciplined, someone will call you rigid. The moment you become quiet, someone will call you distant. The moment you set boundaries, someone will call you selfish. The moment you stop chasing approval, someone will call you arrogant. The moment you choose privacy, someone will assume you are hiding something. The moment you stop reacting, someone will think you are weak. Why? Because people do not judge from truth. They judge from their limitations. They judge from what makes sense to them. They judge from the version of you they benefited from. They judge from their own fears, habits, and insecurities. So when you change, they often do not ask, "Is this person growing?" They ask, "Why are they no longer easy for me to understand, predict, or control?" That's the key. Misunderstood is better than manipulated. That line matters. Misunderstood is better than manipulated. Because the alternative to being misunderstood is often not peace. It is performance. It is shrinking. It is over-explaining. It is editing yourself until everybody stays comfortable. It is keeping your life small enough for every weak mind to approve of it. That is not maturity. That is emotional slavery. You have a choice. You can spend your life trying to correct every false impression. Or you can spend your life building something real. One path drains you. The other frees you. Most people choose the first path without realizing it. They say no, then explain for 10 minutes because they are afraid of being seen as rude. They leave an environment that no longer fits, then keep sending messages to make sure nobody thinks badly of them. They go quiet to protect their peace, then feel guilty because someone else labeled that silence as coldness. This is how insecure people live. Not because they lack intelligence, because they lack tolerance for being misread. And if you cannot tolerate being misread, you will always be controlled by whoever is doing the reading. That is the trap. You do not need to explain your evolution. Say it again. You do not need to explain your evolution. You do not need to explain why your standards changed. You do not need to explain why your circle got smaller. You do not need to explain why your priorities shifted. You do not need to explain why you no longer tolerate what you used to tolerate. You do not need to explain why access to you is more limited now. Growth often looks offensive to people who preferred your old boundaries. Remember that. Growth often looks offensive to people who preferred your old boundaries. When you were available, they called you kind. When you become selective, they call you difficult. When you were open, they called you warm. When you become private, they call you secretive. When you were always around, they called you loyal. When you outgrow the environment, they call you fake. This is not because you became worse. It is because your growth disrupted their comfort. And many people confuse inconvenience with betrayal. That's the key. Let's make it practical. You say no to a request without writing a paragraph. Now someone says you have changed. Good. You leave a friend group that feeds on gossip, pettiness, and stagnation. Now someone says you think you are better than them. Fine. You stop posting every move online because you are building in private. Now someone assumes you failed, fell off, or became bitter. Let them assume. You end a relationship that no longer aligns with your standards. Now you are called cold, selfish, unrealistic, too hard to please. So what? You have a choice. You can interrupt your growth to manage every opinion. Or you can accept the cost of being misunderstood and keep moving. That is strength. Mature people can survive being misread. Immature people cannot. Immature people need everyone to get it. They need constant narrative control. They want every departure interpreted correctly, every silence interpreted correctly, every decision interpreted correctly. So they keep explaining, defending, and performing. And what happens? They burn out. Because there is no finish line. No matter how clearly you explain yourself, someone committed to misunderstanding you will do exactly that. No matter how carefully you speak, someone will hear through the filter of their own insecurity. No matter how honest you are, some people need a villain because the truth would require self-reflection. You cannot win that game. So stop playing it. It's not about perception, it's about discipline. That's the key. Discipline means staying loyal to what is true even when it is not interpreted kindly. Discipline means choosing the right action without demanding universal understanding first. Discipline means letting your life make sense later, instead of forcing it to make sense to everyone now. And that takes emotional control. Because the urge to explain is strong. The urge to defend yourself is strong. The urge to correct every lie, every misreading, every distorted story is strong. But urge is not authority. Emotion is not command. You have a choice. Pause before you explain. Pause before you defend. Pause before you rush to repair an image in somebody else's mind. Ask the ruthless question again. Does this matter to my mission? Not to your ego. Not to your temporary discomfort. Not to your desire to be seen correctly. To your mission. Will correcting this misunderstanding change anything meaningful? Will this explanation build your future? Will this defense create peace? Or are you just trying to reduce the discomfort of not being approved, not being understood, not being framed the way you want? Be honest. Most explanations are not strategic. They are emotional. Most over-clarifying is not wisdom. It is anxiety. You don't need their permission. And you do not need their interpretation either. That is freedom. Here is a stronger identity for you. You are not here to manage impressions. You are here to manage your character. You are not here to make every observer comfortable. You are here to build a life you can respect. You are not here to force understanding. You are here to remain aligned. That is calm certainty. And calm certainty does not beg to be seen correctly. It acts. It adjusts. It builds. It keeps moving. Let them think what they want. You keep building. That phrase needs to become instinct. Let them think what they want. You keep building. Because every attempt to control how everyone sees you is another form of emotional slavery. Think about that. If your peace depends on everybody interpreting you correctly, then your peace is permanently outsourced. It belongs to the crowd. It belongs to the room. It belongs to whoever is whispering, doubting, judging, or projecting. That means you do not own your own state. And this entire book is about taking your state back. So what do you do in real life? First, shorten your explanations. A clean no is enough. A clean boundary is enough. A clean departure is enough. Second, stop volunteering your inner process to people who have not earned access to it. Privacy is not dishonesty. Privacy is protection. Third, let time do some of the explaining. Results explain. Consistency explains. Peace explains. Distance explains. You do not need to narrate every transformation while it is happening. Fourth, expect misinterpretation as part of growth. Do not act shocked every time it happens. Expect it. Prepare for it. Refuse to kneel to it. Misunderstood is better than manipulated. You do not need to explain your evolution. Let them think what they want. You keep building. These are not just phrases. They are armor. Because once you stop needing every mind to hold the right picture of you, you become harder to control, harder to provoke, harder to shame back into your smaller self. And that is the point. Not to become careless. To become anchored. Not to become cold. To become clear. Not to become invisible. To become ungoverned by opinion. You have a choice. Live for interpretation or live for truth. Manage impressions or build a life. Chase understanding or protect your mission. Only one of those paths leads to freedom. The person who must always be understood can always be manipulated. But the person who can tolerate being misread becomes dangerous in the best way. Calm, certain, and focused on what actually matters. You no longer need applause. Now you no longer need perfect interpretation. That is another layer of freedom. Another layer of emotional control. Another layer of not caring about what never deserved your energy. You have stopped reacting. You have stopped begging for approval. You have stopped chasing perfect understanding. Now it is time to protect the resource that all weak reactions, false approval, and endless explanations have been stealing from you all along. Chapter 4. Protect your energy like a weapon. Most people say they want more time. They are wrong. What they really need is more usable energy. Because time without energy is useless. An hour with a focused mind can change your life. 10 distracted hours can leave you exactly where you started. A full day means nothing if your mind is scattered, your emotions are drained, and your attention is being pulled in 100 weak directions. That is why energy matters more than time. Time is the container. Energy is the force. And if you keep wasting the force, the container will never save you. Where your energy goes, your life follows. That is not a motivational phrase. That is law. If your energy goes to gossip, your life becomes small. If your energy goes to resentment, your life becomes heavy. If your energy goes to overthinking, your life becomes slow. If your energy goes to drama, your life becomes unstable. If your energy goes to meaningless people and meaningless distractions, your life starts reflecting that meaninglessness. Where your energy goes, your life follows. That's the key. You need to stop thinking about energy as a vague spiritual concept. It is not vague. It is measurable. You feel it every day. You know when you are clear. You know when you are cluttered. You know when your mind is sharp. You know when it is leaking. And most people are leaking. They wake up already tired, not because their body is broken, but because their mind never shut off. They carry yesterday's conversations into today's focus. They replay conflict in the shower. They rehearse imaginary arguments over breakfast. They scroll garbage before their feet even touch the floor. Then they wonder why they have no drive. Because you gave your drive away before the day started. Fatigue is often misplaced focus. Read that again. Fatigue is often misplaced focus. Yes, sometimes you are physically tired. Sometimes your body needs sleep, food, movement, recovery. But a huge amount of modern exhaustion is not physical. It is psychological, emotional, self-created. You are not always tired because life is too heavy. Sometimes you are tired because your attention is undisciplined. That is a harder truth. But it is a useful truth. Because if the problem is only outside you, you stay helpless. If the problem is partly how you spend your energy, then you have leverage. Then you have responsibility. Then you have a way out. You have a choice. You can keep donating your mind to nonsense. Or you can become ruthless about what gets access to you. That is the transformation. Look at where people leak energy. Gossip. They sit in conversations about people they do not respect, discussing situations they cannot control, feeding emotions they do not need. They leave the conversation with nothing gained and something lost. Focus lost. Peace lost. Clean mental space lost. Conflict. Not necessary conflict. Manufactured conflict. Ego conflict. Petty conflict. Digital conflict. The argument that should have ended in one sentence but becomes 3 hours of typing, replaying, proving, and performing. Doom scrolling. 1,000 micro-stimulations. 1,000 emotional hooks. Outrage. Envy. Comparison. Noise. Every swipe weakens concentration. Every scroll teaches your mind to chase novelty instead of depth. Overthinking. Running circles around decisions that require action, not obsession. Replaying the same fear from different angles and calling it analysis. It is not analysis. It is avoidance dressed up as effort. Fake obligations. Saying yes because you feel guilty. Showing up because you do not want to disappoint. Taking calls you do not need. Entertaining people who drain you. Carrying responsibilities that belong to others because you train them to expect access. This is how people become empty. Not from one giant mistake. From constant leakage. Where your energy goes, your life follows. So if your life feels diluted, distracted, and underpowered, stop asking only what you need to add. Ask what you need to cut. That's the key. People love addition. New routines. New tools. New goals. New hacks. But power often comes from subtraction. Fewer arguments. Fewer explanations. Fewer tabs open in your mind. Fewer pointless conversations. Fewer emotional debts. Fewer people with access to your peace. It's not about doing more, it's about leaking less. That is discipline. Let's make it practical. Have you ever had a conversation that ended, but did not leave? Someone said something subtle, disrespectful, manipulative, dismissive. You stayed composed on the surface, but mentally you kept carrying it. You replayed it in the car, in the kitchen, in bed. The conversation ended, but it kept billing your attention. That is an energy debt. And some of you are living with dozens of these debts at once. Old resentment, unspoken boundaries, lingering guilt, unfinished arguments, imaginary future catastrophes. No wonder you feel tired. Your mind is crowded. You are not weak. You are overloaded. Fatigue is often misplaced focus. That's the key. Now listen carefully. Protecting your energy does not mean becoming antisocial, detached from reality, or selfish in some cartoonish way. It means becoming selective, intentional, harder to drain. The same way a serious athlete protects recovery, a serious builder protects mental clarity. Because peace is not a luxury. Peace is a performance enhancer. Read that again. Peace is a performance enhancer. You think you need more motivation. Sometimes what you actually need is less interference, less noise, less access, less emotional pollution, less chaos disguised as connection. When your mind is clean, you think better. When your mind is clean, you decide faster. When your mind is clean, you create more. When your mind is clean, you tolerate discomfort better. When your mind is clean, your standards rise naturally. Guard your mind like it prints results. Because it does. Your mind produces your words, your decisions, your focus, your habits, your emotional state, your relationships, your career moves, your recovery, your identity. Everything runs through it. So why would you guard your money harder than your mind? Why would you protect your phone battery harder than your peace? Why would you let random people, random content, random irritations, and random obligations walk straight into the control room of your life? That is carelessness. And careless people stay drained. You have a choice. You can keep acting like every invitation deserves consideration, every message deserves response, every issue deserves your emotional labor. Or you can start filtering. Ruthlessly. Here is how. First, reduce exposure. Not everything needs to be consumed. Not every notification needs to be seen. Not every conversation needs to be entered. If something consistently pollutes your state, reduce contact. That includes media, environments, and people. Second, close loops quickly. Have the hard conversation. Set the boundary. Make the decision. Delete the distraction. End the ambiguity. Open loops drain energy. Decisive action restores it. Third, stop lending emotional labor for free. Some people call only to dump. Some people talk only to complain. Some people bring chaos and call it honesty. You are not required to be the emotional landfill for undisciplined people. You don't need their permission to step back. Fourth, build recovery into your discipline. Silence, walking, deep work, sleep, stillness, time off the screen, time away from noise. These are not indulgences. These are maintenance. It's not about toughness, it's about stewardship. That's the key. A strong person is not someone who can endure unlimited chaos. A strong person is someone wise enough to stop living in it. And yes, sometimes protecting your energy will disappoint people. Good. Sometimes it will make you seem less available. Good. Sometimes people will say you changed. You did. You stopped treating your attention like it was free. You stopped treating your peace like it was optional. You stopped treating exhaustion like a badge of honor. That matters. Because many people are secretly proud of how drained they are. They wear burnout like proof of importance. They glorify being overwhelmed. They confuse depletion with productivity. Wrong. If your lifestyle keeps you mentally fragmented, emotionally reactive, and physically depleted, it is not working. It's not about busyness, it's about effectiveness. That's the key. A calmer mind gets more done. A protected mind makes better decisions. A focused mind wastes less life. So from this point forward, stop asking only, "What should I do today?" Also ask, "What must not touch my energy today?" That question changes everything. What conversation must not enter your head? What app must not enter your morning? What person must not enter your peace without limits? What old resentment must not enter another hour of your life? Choose carefully. Where your energy goes, your life follows. Fatigue is often misplaced focus. Guard your mind like it prints results. Repeat those until they become standards, not slogans. Because once you understand that your energy is a weapon, you stop handing it out like scrap paper. You become more selective, more composed, more difficult to drain, more dangerous in the best way. And that is what this book is building inside you. A person who does not react cheaply, does not seek approval desperately, does not explain endlessly, and does not leak power into things that produce nothing. You are learning not to care about what weakens you. That is not indifference for its own sake. That is discipline. That is self-respect. That is control. You protected your reactions. You rejected the need for approval. You stopped managing every misunderstanding. Now you are protecting the fuel itself. And once you stop wasting fuel, the next step becomes obvious. Stop performing for the crowd and start building in silence. Chapter 5. Stop proving and start doing. A lot of people do not want power. They want the appearance of power. They do not want mastery. They want the image of mastery. They do not want results. They want recognition before results. And that is why they stay stuck. Because proving yourself is one of the fastest ways to waste a life. You start talking too much, posting too much, defending too much, comparing too much, announcing too much, explaining too much. And while you are busy looking powerful, somebody quieter is becoming powerful. That's the truth. Proof is noisy. Results are quiet. Read that again in your mind. Proof is noisy. Results are quiet. A person trying to prove intelligence has to keep speaking. A person trying to prove strength has to keep performing. A person trying to prove success has to keep displaying evidence. A person trying to prove worth has to keep asking the room to notice. But a person with substance does not need constant display, because substance eventually becomes visible on its own. That's the key. When you are obsessed with proving, your attention leaves the work and goes to the audience. That is the trap. Now you are not building for truth. You are building for reaction. You are not improving for mastery. You are improving for approval. You are not moving with discipline. You are moving with performance anxiety. And performance anxiety kills depth. You have a choice. You can spend the next few years trying to look like somebody, or you can spend the next few years becoming somebody. One path is loud and fragile. The other is quiet and dangerous. Most people choose the loud path because it gives immediate emotional rewards. A few likes, a few compliments, a few moments of superiority, a few chances to feel seen. But those rewards come at a cost. They make you impatient. They make you addicted to visibility. They make you confuse attention with progress. And attention is not progress. That line matters. Attention is not progress. A lot of people are getting attention for things they have not actually built. Half-finished businesses, beginner-level discipline, announced routines, declared identities, public promises, motivational performances. But what happens after the announcement? Often nothing, because the emotional payoff came too early. The applause was received before the effort was completed. And once that happens, momentum drops.
Why?
Because part of the brain now feels rewarded without having earned the real outcome. That is why public proving weakens private discipline. Your life changes in silence before it shows in public. That is how real growth works. The body changes before people notice. The bank account changes before people know. The mind changes before the world adjusts. The standards change before the reputation catches up. Real change begins in private. Not on display. Not in explanation. Not in argument. In repetition. In solitude. In disciplined, invisible action. That's the key. Look at how people waste energy trying to prove. They argue online with strangers they would never trade lives with. They get baited into defending their intelligence, their politics, their values, their choices, their very existence to random people with no authority. Hours disappear. Focus disappears. Peace disappears. And for what? To win a comment section? That is not power. That is insecurity looking for a stage. You don't need their permission. You do not need to prove your intelligence to a fool. You do not need to prove your growth to people committed to your old identity. You do not need to prove your value to anyone whose respect only appears after public evidence. You do not need to prove your future before you build it. You need to get back to work. That's the instruction. Stop treating every challenge as an invitation to perform. Some competitions are beneath your potential. Some battles are a distraction disguised as importance. Some people want to pull you into proving because proof is easier to interrupt than progress. Remember that. If they can keep you explaining, they can keep you delayed. If they can keep you arguing, they can keep you average. If they can keep you performing, they can keep you from building anything deep. You have a choice. Stay in competitions that do not matter. Or leave the arena entirely and build something real. It's not about image, it's about discipline. That's the key. And let's talk about flexing half-built success. This is everywhere. A small win gets exaggerated into an identity. A little money gets displayed like wealth. A few disciplined weeks get marketed like mastery. One good idea gets spoken about like execution already happened. And because the image is being maintained, the real work gets neglected.
Why?
Because proving is exhausting. You now have to feed the story. You have to keep showing signs. You have to keep posting updates. You have to keep performing confidence. You have to keep curating the look of progress. All of that burns energy that should have gone into actual progress. Proof is noisy. Results are quiet. The serious person knows this. The serious person does not rush to display the seed. They protect the seed. They water it. They work it. They stay with it long after the audience gets bored. Because they understand something weak people do not. A life worth envying is usually built during seasons nobody claps for. Your life changes in silence before it shows in public. That phrase should become a standard. Now consider goals. Many people love announcing goals. They say what they are about to do. They tell everyone the plan. They speak the future out loud as if words themselves were movement. Sometimes that comes from excitement, but often it comes from ego. The ego loves being seen as ambitious more than it loves the pain of becoming disciplined. So instead of executing, people narrate. Instead of working, they signal. Instead of building, they broadcast. Then months pass. Nothing substantial happened, but plenty was said. That is why you need to become suspicious of your own urge to talk. Ask yourself, am I sharing this because it serves the mission? Or because I want to borrow the feeling of progress without paying for it? Be honest. That question will save you. Real confidence does not interrupt itself to be noticed. That line matters too. Real confidence does not interrupt itself to be noticed. A truly confident person is not constantly checking whether others recognize their value. They are too busy strengthening it. They do not need to remind the room who they are. They do not need to force every conversation toward their achievements. They do not need to display every workout, every meeting, every win, every plan. Why? Because they trust process more than performance. That is confidence. Not loudness. Not branding. Not constant proof. Trust in process. You have a choice. You can keep asking, how do I look? Or you can start asking, what am I building? One question feeds ego. The other feeds destiny. Less talk. More weight behind your name. That should become your operating system. Less talk when you are tempted to explain. Less talk when you are tempted to impress. Less talk when you are tempted to defend unfinished work. Less talk when you are tempted to announce what should still be protected. More weight behind your name. More skill. More substance. More consistency. More discipline. More outcomes that make explanation unnecessary. That's the key. Here are the practical instructions. First, stop arguing where no real outcome exists. No more wrestling with strangers for identity points. No more endless debates that improve nothing. No more spending your prime hours trying to look right. Second, delay your announcements. Let the goal mature in private. Let the routine harden. Let the evidence build. Let the result gain shape before your mouth gets involved. Third, separate validation from execution. Do not post to feel committed. Do not talk to feel important. Do not share to feel productive. Do the work first. Fourth, choose private standards. What do you demand from yourself when nobody sees? How do you act when there is no witness? How consistent are you when there is no praise? That is your real level. Not your image. Not your language. Not your projected identity. Your real level is your private pattern. It's not about being impressive, it's about being undeniable. That's the key. Undeniable people do not spend years chasing recognition. They spend years building weight. Then one day, the room feels it. Not because they shouted. Because the evidence arrived. Because the work speaks. Because the results speak. Because the posture speaks. Because the discipline carved something visible into their life. And once the evidence is real, it carries a different kind of force. Quiet force. Stable force. Force that does not need decoration. Proof is noisy. Results are quiet. Your life changes in silence before it shows in public. Less talk. More weight behind your name. Repeat those until your behavior changes. Because this book is not trying to make you sound strong. It is trying to make you strong. Not reactive. Not approval hungry. Not explanation addicted. Not performance driven. Strong. And real strength wastes very little energy on proving. It uses that energy to build. You stopped reacting. You stopped chasing validation. You stopped managing every misunderstanding. You protected your energy. Now you have stopped performing for the crowd. Good. Because the next lesson will test whether your confidence is real or conditional. You no longer need to prove yourself. Now you must learn how to survive the moment life says no without letting that no define you. Chapter 6. Make peace with rejection. Most people do not fear failure. They fear rejection. Failure can be private. Rejection feels personal. Failure says, "This did not work." Rejection says, "You were not chosen." And that is why rejection hits deeper. A job says no. A person leaves. A client disappears. An audience does not respond. A door closes. A message is ignored. An opportunity goes elsewhere. And suddenly people do not just question the outcome. They question themselves. That is where the damage begins. Not in the rejection itself. In the meaning you attach to it. That's the key. Rejection is not always a wound. Often, it is a filter. Often, it is a correction. Often, it is a redirection. Rejection is redirection for the focused. Read that again in your mind. Rejection is redirection for the focused. A focused person does not worship one door. A focused person does not collapse because one path closes. A focused person does not confuse one no with the end of the story. They understand something emotional people forget. Life removes as much as it gives. And what gets removed is not always a loss. Sometimes it is rescue. Sometimes the job you did not get would have shrunk you. Sometimes the relationship you lost would have kept you distracted. Sometimes the client who ghosted you was never aligned. Sometimes the market ignoring your first attempt forced you to sharpen your message, your product, your standards, your patience. You have a choice. You can treat rejection like an identity verdict. Or you can treat it like information. One makes you weaker. The other makes you dangerous in the best way. Because emotionally strong people do not ask only, "Why did this happen to me?" They ask, "What is this revealing?" That's the key. What is it revealing? A skill gap. A timing problem. A bad fit. A weak strategy. A false attachment. A dependency you needed to break. An ego you needed to outgrow. These are useful questions. These are adult questions. But most people never ask them. They personalize everything. They do not get the job, and they conclude they are not good enough. They lose the relationship, and they conclude they are not lovable. They launch the offer, and nobody buys, so they conclude they have no value. Wrong. A closed door is not a closed life. That line matters. A closed door is not a closed life. You must stop letting one outcome define your whole identity. That is emotional weakness. That is attachment without discipline. That is giving one result too much authority over your self-concept. And once one result owns your identity, you become fragile. Then every no feels fatal. Every delay feels humiliating. Every silence feels final. But it is not final. It is feedback, or filtration, or redirection. Sometimes all three. Rejection is redirection for the focused. Now listen carefully. This chapter is not telling you not to feel anything. That would be fake. That would be shallow. If you cared, rejection will sting. Of course it will. You are human. You wanted the opportunity. You wanted the person. You wanted the outcome. You wanted the effort to land. So yes, feel it. But do not build a house inside it. Feel it briefly. Learn from it fully. Carry none of it. That is the discipline. Feel it briefly. Not for 6 months. Not as an identity. Not as a permanent story about your worth. Briefly. Long enough to be honest. Short enough to stay functional. Learn from it fully. Do not waste the lesson because you were too busy dramatizing the pain. Ask what it taught you. Ask what it exposed. Ask what it corrected. Ask where you need to improve and where you simply need to detach. Carry none of it. This means no bitterness, no self-pity, no dragging old rejection into every new opportunity, no making new people pay for old wounds, no turning one bad experience into a lifelong excuse. That's the key. Look at the job rejection. You applied. You prepared. You hoped. Then the answer came back. No. Most people do one of two weak things. They either crumble and tell themselves a dramatic story, or they get bitter and act like the system is stupid, corrupt, blind, or unfair every single time. Now, sometimes the system is flawed. Sometimes the decision is political. Sometimes the process is broken. But none of that changes your responsibility. Your responsibility is to stay useful. Can you improve your skills? Can you improve your communication? Can you improve your fit? Can you improve your persistence? Can you apply wider, smarter, harder? That is power. Not endless brooding. Not wounded ego. You don't need their permission. One company not choosing you does not mean life rejected you. One person not seeing your value does not mean you have no value. One market not responding yet does not mean you have nothing to offer. Yet matters. That word matters. Yeah. Because many people quit in the middle of becoming. They interpret early silence as final judgment. And that kills momentum. A closed door is not a closed life. Now look at relationships. This is where rejection becomes especially dangerous because the ego gets involved fast. Someone leaves. Someone pulls back. Someone chooses someone else. Someone stops investing. Someone says, directly or indirectly, not you. And suddenly people start begging, proving, bargaining, over-explaining, performing. Why? Because they tied their identity to being chosen. That is the mistake. Being chosen by someone is not the same as being worthy. Say that again in your mind. Being chosen by someone is not the same as being worthy. Some people reject what is good for them. Some people choose based on wounds, patterns, fear, convenience, or immaturity. Some people cannot recognize value they are not ready to hold. So stop turning every relational rejection into a moral verdict on your worth. You have a choice. You can chase people for closure, validation, and reversal. Or you can accept the information and return to your standards. It's not about being chosen, it's about being aligned. That's the key. If someone does not choose you clearly, that is information. If someone only wants parts of you, that is information. If someone withdraws when you stop shrinking, that is information. Use it. Do not worship it. Do not personalize it. Use it. And then there is rejection from the market. You build something, offer something, create something, release something, and nothing happens. No traction, no applause, no sales, no attention. This is where weak people make the outcome mean they should stop. But strong people understand the market is not emotional. The market is data. Maybe the offer is unclear. Maybe the timing is wrong. Maybe the value is real but the positioning is weak. Maybe you are early. Maybe you are average. Maybe you need 10 more reps, not a funeral for your ambition. That's the key. Do not romanticize rejection. But do not demonize it either. Study it. Emotionally strong people do not collapse at rejection. They extract information, adjust, and move forward without drama. That is a different identity. A higher identity. A more disciplined identity. You hear no, and instead of spiraling, you sharpen. You lose something, and instead of begging, you recalibrate. You get ignored, and instead of quitting, you improve the signal. You get rejected, and instead of turning inward with shame, you turn forward with strategy. That is power. It's not about sensitivity, it's about resilience. That's the key. Here is the real danger of rejection. Not that it hurts once, but that it can make you hesitate forever. One bad breakup, and now you do not trust anyone. One failed launch, and now you hide your work. One public embarrassment, and now you stay small. One no from authority, and now you never ask again. That is how rejection keeps controlling people long after the event is over. Not through pain. Through hesitation. Through self-censorship. Through fear of re-entry. And if rejection teaches you to stop trying, then rejection won twice. Do not let it win twice. You have a choice. Get wounded and wiser. Or get wounded and smaller. Only one of those choices respects your future. So here is the practical discipline. First, separate outcome from identity. You lost the opportunity. That is all. Do not add, which means I am not enough. Second, review the facts without drama. What was in your control? What was not? What can be improved? What must simply be accepted? Third, keep moving quickly. Not recklessly. Not numbly. But quickly enough that rejection does not turn into stagnation. Apply again. Build again. Ask again. Offer again. Love again when the time is right. Fourth, refuse humiliation narratives. No more, I was rejected, so now I must prove myself. No more, I was overlooked, so I'll become obsessed with revenge. No more, I heard no, so I'll never risk that pain again. That is ego, not strength. Feel it briefly. Learn from it fully. Carry none of it. Rejection is redirection for the focused. A closed door is not a closed life. Repeat those until your nervous system believes them. Because the person who fears rejection will always negotiate away their standards to avoid discomfort. But the person who has made peace with rejection becomes free. Free to ask. Free to move. Free to leave. Free to risk. Free to build without constant emotional collapse. And this book is building freedom. Freedom from reaction. Freedom from approval. Freedom from explanation. Freedom from wasted energy. Freedom from performance. And now, freedom from the terror of hearing no. You no longer need every door to open. You need the discipline to keep walking when one closes. That is emotional control. That is power. That is not caring about what was never meant to own you. You have learned how to face rejection without folding. Now you are ready for the next level, cutting your addiction to emotional chaos and building a life around something far stronger. Chapter 7. Detach from drama, attach to discipline. A lot of people say they want peace. But what they are actually addicted to is drama. Not because drama is good. Because drama is stimulating. It feels alive. It feels urgent. It feels intense. It gives the nervous system something to chew on. It creates movement, noise, emotion, and false significance. And that is why so many people stay trapped in it. They mistake intensity for importance. That is the first lie. Intensity is not importance. Read that again in your mind. Intensity is not importance. Just because something feels big does not mean it matters. Just because something is emotional does not mean it is meaningful. Just because something is loud does not mean it deserves your energy. Drama consumes. Discipline compounds. That is the law. Drama eats time. Drama eats attention. Drama eats emotional stability. Drama eats consistency. Discipline builds skill. Discipline builds trust. Discipline builds results. Discipline builds identity. One burns. One grows. You have a choice. You can keep feeding the chaos because it feels stimulating, or you can start feeding the structure that actually changes your life. That's the key. Most people are not destroyed by one catastrophic event. They are worn down by recurring emotional turbulence. The same fight, the same cycle, the same friend group dysfunction, the same ego battles at work, the same overreaction, the same apology, the same collapse, the same restart. And because it keeps happening, they start normalizing it. They call it passion. They call it chemistry. They call it just how people are. They call it part of the process. No. A lot of what people call normal is just familiar dysfunction. And familiarity is dangerous because it stops looking expensive. Look at relationship drama. Some people are not in relationships. They are in emotional roller coasters. Conflict, reconciliation, tension, distance, pursuit, reassurance, disappointment, repeat. Every week is a new emotional event. Every conversation becomes a hidden negotiation. Every issue becomes a performance. Every silence becomes a threat. Every disagreement becomes a referendum on the whole relationship. That is not love. That is instability. And instability drains power. Drama consumes. Discipline compounds. The disciplined relationship is not the one with the biggest emotional spikes. It is the one with the strongest standards, the strongest communication, the strongest boundaries, the strongest ability to address problems without turning them into theater. It's not about chemistry, it's about discipline. That's the key. Now look at friend groups. Some groups do not bond through growth. They bond through gossip. They need a villain. They need fresh conflict. They need status games. They need subtle disrespect. They need constant discussion about other people's lives because nobody in the group is building one worth focusing on. That kind of environment feels active, but it is empty. And if you stay in it too long, it trains your mind to crave noise instead of substance. You stop feeling normal in peace. You stop feeling connected without dysfunction. You stop feeling alive unless something is happening. That is addiction. Not to drama as an event. To drama as a state. Intensity is not importance. You need to remember that every time chaos tries to disguise itself as meaning. And then there is work drama. This one is especially common because people hide it behind professionalism. Office politics. Credit battles. Passive-aggressive messages. Meetings about ego. Conflicts fueled by insecurity. Power games played by people who produce little but posture constantly. So many people waste years of their lives emotionally entangled in environments like that. Not because they had to. Because they got pulled in. They needed to respond. Needed to prove. Needed to win. Needed to be seen as right. Needed to make sure everyone knew what really happened. And now the real work is gone. Replaced by emotional admin. That is how average environments trap potentially exceptional people. They bait them into nonsense. You don't need their permission to stay out of foolishness. You do not need to attend every ego battle. You do not need to solve every group tension. You do not need to involve yourself in every dramatic shift in the room. You need to protect your mission. That's the key. Drama feels urgent but produces nothing. Discipline feels boring but changes everything. That contrast matters. Drama gives immediate stimulation. Discipline gives delayed results. Drama gives emotional spikes. Discipline gives earned confidence. Drama makes you feel involved. Discipline makes you become effective. And because most people are ruled by feeling, they choose drama without realizing it. They choose what stimulates them now instead of what strengthens them later. You have a choice. Choose stimulation, or choose growth. Choose emotional entertainment, or choose durable progress. Only one compounds. Drama consumes. Discipline compounds. Now let's get even more practical. Why do people struggle with discipline? Because discipline is quiet. It does not flatter the ego. It does not create a scene. It does not always produce immediate emotional rewards. It often looks repetitive, plain, unglamorous. Wake up. Train. Work. Read. Build. Rest. Repeat. That rhythm is not exciting to the undisciplined mind. But it is powerful. Because repetition shapes identity. And identity shapes destiny. You do not become strong by occasionally performing strength when you feel inspired. You become strong by repeating useful behaviors long after the emotional novelty wears off. That is discipline. It's not about mood, it's about standards. That's the key. This is where most people lose. They wait to feel right before they act right. They wait to feel motivated before they begin. They wait to feel calm before they focus. They wait to feel confident before they move. They wait to feel emotionally stable before they become consistent. Wrong. Your routine must be stronger than your feelings. Read that again. Your routine must be stronger than your feelings. Because feelings change hourly. Moods change daily. Energy fluctuates. Emotions rise and fall. If your progress depends on how you feel, your progress will always be unstable. But when routine becomes automatic, feelings lose veto power. You do the workout even if your mood is low. You do the work even if your ego is bruised. You go to bed on time even if distraction is calling. You stay out of drama even if the room wants you to join. That is real strength. Not intensity. Control. Intensity is not importance. A screaming argument may feel more significant than quiet consistency. It is not. A dramatic breakup may feel more meaningful than a stable, disciplined relationship. It is not. A chaotic work environment may feel more important than quiet, focused execution. It is not. The mind is easily tricked by volume. Do not let volume decide value. You have a choice. You can keep measuring life by what feels intense. Or you can start measuring life by what produces results. That shift changes everything. So here is the behavioral instruction. First, audit your sources of drama. Who drains you through repeated cycles? What environments keep you emotionally activated? What conversations always leave you agitated, distracted, or resentful? What habits are training your mind to expect constant stimulation? Write them down if you have to. Be honest. Second, stop glamorizing emotional chaos. A chaotic relationship is not deeper because it is painful. A dramatic friendship is not more loyal because it is complicated. A stressful workflow is not more important because it is noisy. Stop confusing instability with meaning. Third, build anchor routines. Morning structure. Focused work blocks. Training times. Sleep discipline. Screen limits. Silence. Reading. Walking. Reflection. These routines sound simple. Good. Simple is repeatable. Repeatable is powerful. Fourth, reduce decision-making around essentials. Do not negotiate with yourself every day about basic standards. Decide once. This is when I train. This is when I work. This is when I disconnect. This is what I do when triggered. This is what I no longer participate in. That is how discipline becomes automatic. And when discipline becomes automatic, drama loses leverage. Your routine must be stronger than your feelings. That phrase should become a weapon in your mind. When you want to skip. when you want to spiral, when you want to engage, when you want to react, when you want to abandon the structure because emotion is loud. Say it again. Your routine must be stronger than your feelings. Because the goal is not to become someone who never feels turbulence. The goal is to become someone whose turbulence no longer runs the system. That is emotional control. That is maturity. That is what this book is building. A person who is not seduced by noise. A person who is not addicted to emotional spikes. A person who does not need chaos to feel alive. A person who can build steadily while others keep burning themselves out in cycles. Drama consumes. Discipline compounds. Intensity is not importance. Your routine must be stronger than your feelings. Repeat those until your life starts reflecting them. Because once you detach from drama, you get your mind back. You get your time back. You get your energy back. And most importantly, you get your direction back. You stop living from emotional event to emotional event. You start living from standard to standard. That is how you stop caring about what distracts and start caring only about what builds. You no longer need chaos to feel alive. Now you are ready to confront one of the deepest forms of control left in your life. The fear of being seen, judged, and talked about by other people. Chapter 8. Kill the fear of other people's opinions. One of the deepest prisons in adult life has no walls, no bars, no locks, and yet millions of people live inside it every day. The prison is other people's opinions. Not even their actual opinions all the time. Imagined opinions. Projected judgment. Anticipated criticism. A mental audience that follows you everywhere and keeps asking one question. What will they think? That question has ruined more lives than lack of talent ever did. It ruins style. It ruins speech. It ruins creativity. It ruins leadership. It ruins honesty. It ruins timing. It ruins courage. Because fear of criticism creates hesitation. Hesitation creates inconsistency. And inconsistency kills momentum. That's the key. You don't usually lose your life in one dramatic collapse. You lose it in tiny acts of self-censorship. You wanted to speak, but you softened. You wanted to create, but you delayed. You wanted to launch, but you hid. You wanted to change, but you stayed where people already understood you. You wanted to tell the truth, but you edited it to protect yourself from reaction. And after years of that, you look up and realize something painful. You did not build your life. You managed perception. That is not freedom. You cannot be free and managed by opinions. Read that again in your mind. You cannot be free and managed by opinions. Freedom means movement without constant permission. Freedom means action without constant approval. Freedom means choosing what is right, necessary, and aligned even when someone somewhere may misunderstand it, laugh at it, doubt it, or dislike it. If you need universal approval before you move, you will never move boldly. That is the trap. And it begins earlier than most people realize. You think about what to wear based on what people might say. You think about what to post based on whether it will be accepted. You think about what business to start based on whether you will look foolish if it fails. You think about changing careers, leaving relationships, setting boundaries, starting over, speaking up, showing up differently, and every decision gets filtered through one weak lens. How will this look? Wrong question. The better question is this aligned? That's the key. Most people are too busy with themselves to study you. That line matters more than you think. Most people are too busy with themselves to study you. They are thinking about their own body, their own money, their own insecurities, their own regrets, their own problems, their own image, their own fear. Yes, some people judge. Yes, some people talk. Yes, some people watch. but not nearly as much as your fear tells you they do. And even when they do judge, so what? What changes? Does their opinion build your future? Does their doubt improve your standards? Does their mockery pay your bills? Does their approval heal your regret if you betray yourself? No. So why are you giving strangers, acquaintances, weak minds, and casual observers this much authority over your decisions? You have a choice. You can keep living in anticipation of other people's reactions. Or you can start living in loyalty to your own direction. One path creates average lives. The other creates real ones. Opinion fear produces average lives because bold action becomes impossible when every move must survive public approval. That is the plain truth. Average dressing, average speaking, average ambition, average honesty, average risks, average careers, average relationships, average expression. Why? Because average is safer. Average gets less attention. Average gets less criticism. Average gets less resistance. But average also gets less life. You don't need their permission. You do not need permission to dress differently. You do not need permission to speak clearly. You do not need permission to create publicly. You do not need permission to change your mind. You do not need permission to outgrow your current identity. You do not need permission to build something before other people understand it. You need courage. Not theatrical courage. Behavioral courage. The kind that acts while uncomfortable. That's the key. A lot of people think confidence means not caring what anyone thinks because you are somehow beyond judgment. Wrong. Confidence is not the absence of judgment. Confidence is the willingness to act anyway. That definition matters. Confidence is not being praised. Confidence is not being universally liked. Confidence is not walking into a room and assuming everyone approves of you. Confidence is acting in alignment while judgment remains possible. Maybe even likely. That is why confidence must be trained, not fantasized about. And how do you train it? Through exposure. By doing the thing while feeling seen. By speaking while your voice shakes a little. By posting before it is perfect. By launching before everyone believes in it. By showing up differently before the social circle adjusts. By letting people watch you change in real time. That is how you become free. Not by waiting until criticism disappears. Criticism will not disappear. You just stop kneeling to it. Let them watch. Let them doubt. Keep moving. That phrase needs to become instinct. Let them watch. Let them doubt. Keep moving. Because many people never become who they could have become simply because they wanted to avoid looking foolish during the transition. They wanted the final identity without the awkward middle. They wanted mastery without beginner exposure. They wanted success without public uncertainty. They wanted reinvention without social friction. Impossible. Every real transformation has an awkward phase. There is a phase where you are not who you were, but not yet fully who you are becoming. That phase is vulnerable. And weak people quit there because the opinions get loud. Strong people continue. That's the difference. Let's make it practical. You want to start creating content, but you are worried old classmates, co-workers, or relatives will judge you. Good. Let them. Their judgment changes nothing unless you obey it. You want to dress sharper, simpler, louder, cleaner, more authentically, but you are worried people will notice. They will. And then they will move on with their lives. Most people are too busy with themselves to study you. You want to leave a career path that looks respectable but feels dead inside. Now fear enters. What will they say? What if they think I failed? What if they think I'm unstable? What if they don't understand? They may say all of that. Still not your problem. You cannot be free and managed by opinions. And let's go deeper. Often the fear is not even about people's words. It is about discomfort. The discomfort of being seen differently. The discomfort of being doubted. The discomfort of being talked about. The discomfort of no longer blending in. So understand this clearly. You do not need to eliminate the discomfort. You need to normalize it. It's not about fearlessness, it's about tolerance. That's the key. Can you tolerate being watched? Can you tolerate being misunderstood? Can you tolerate being doubted? Can you tolerate not looking polished in the beginning? Can you tolerate the temporary friction that comes with real growth? If you can, you win. Because most people cannot. Most people retreat the second social discomfort appears. They call it being realistic. They call it timing. They call it humility. But often it is just fear wearing adult language. You have a choice. Obey the discomfort. Or outlast it. One makes you smaller. The other makes you stronger. Here is the behavioral instruction. First, identify where opinion fear is currently costing you. Where are you hesitating because of imagined judgment? Where are you shrinking to stay acceptable? Where are you delaying action because you do not want to be seen failing, learning, changing, or trying? Be honest. Second, act in small visible ways. Say the thing. Wear the thing. Post the thing. Launch the thing. Set the boundary. Make the move. Not recklessly. Deliberately. Train your system to survive visibility. Third, stop rehearsing public reaction. Do not spend your days imagining who will judge what. That is wasted energy. Return to your mission. Return to your standards. Return to your work. Fourth, reframe judgment. If people notice you, good. If people doubt you, good. If people mock you, fine. If people misunderstand you, expected. None of it changes the requirement. Keep moving. Let them watch. Let them doubt. Keep moving. That is how confidence gets built. Not by controlling the room. By becoming less interruptible by the room. And that is what this entire book is teaching you. Stop reacting. Stop seeking approval. Stop over-explaining. Stop leaking energy. Stop proving. Stop collapsing at rejection. Stop feeding drama. And now, stop living under the imagined rule of other people's opinions. Because a person managed by judgment can never become fully dangerous in the best way. They will always hesitate right before breakthrough. They will always edit themselves right before growth. They will always ask the crowd right before the leap. No more. Most people are too busy with themselves to study you. You cannot be free and managed by opinions. Let them watch. Let them doubt. Keep moving. Repeat those until your behavior changes. Because once you kill the fear of other people's opinions, your movement becomes cleaner. Your attention becomes yours again. Your decisions become sharper. Your growth becomes faster. You stop building for the audience and start building from conviction. That is not arrogance. That is freedom. And freedom creates a new kind of power. The power to say less, reveal less, and move with greater precision. Now that you are no longer trying to satisfy the eyes on you, you are ready to use one of the most underestimated forms of power in the world. Chapter 9. Use silence to build power. Weak people think power is loud. They think power is constant explanation, constant expression, constant reaction, constant visibility, constant proof that they are present, involved, important, and informed. They think if they do not speak, they disappear. Wrong. A lot of people talk because they are afraid of what silence exposes. Their insecurity, their need for attention, their lack of control, their inability to sit still without filling space. That is why silence intimidates them. Because silence cannot be easily read. Silence cannot be easily baited. Silence cannot be easily used. Silence is not empty. It is loaded. Read that again in your mind. Silence is not empty. It is loaded. Loaded with control. Loaded with awareness. Loaded with restraint. Loaded with observation. Loaded with power that has not been wasted on unnecessary words. That's the key. You need to stop thinking of silence as passivity. Silence is not weakness. Silence is selection. It is the refusal to spend energy where nothing meaningful can be gained. It is the discipline to hold your state instead of spilling it everywhere. It is the maturity to know that not every thought deserves air, not every emotion deserves language, and not every challenge deserves engagement. You have a choice. You can keep talking your power away, or you can start holding it long enough to direct it. One path creates noise. The other creates presence. And presence matters more than noise. The person who talks constantly often weakens their own impact. Why? Because they reveal too much. Too much emotion. Too much strategy. Too much insecurity. Too much need to be seen. Too much need to fill every gap with proof of life. And when you reveal too much, you become easier to read. Easier to predict. Easier to trigger. Easier to manipulate. Easier to attack. What you do not reveal cannot be attacked as easily. That line matters. What you do not reveal cannot be attacked as easily. This does not mean hiding everything. It means guarding what matters. It means not handing people a map to your emotions. It means not making your internal state public property. Look at how often people sabotage themselves with their mouths. They announce every plan before it has strength. They reveal every insecurity to people who have not earned trust. They argue with fools and accidentally lower themselves to the fool's level. They explain their boundaries until the boundary disappears. They speak from impulse, then spend days repairing the consequences. That is not honesty. That is leakage. It's not about expression, it's about discipline. That's the key. Now think about arguments. A fool wants one thing from you. Access. Access to your attention. Access to your emotion. Access to your state. Access to your time. And the moment you engage on their terms, they have already gained something. That is why refusing to argue with fools is not avoidance. It is intelligence. Not every challenge is worthy of your response. Not every accusation requires defense. Not every insult requires retaliation. Not every misunderstanding requires clarification. Some things die faster when you stop feeding them. Silence unsettles chaos because chaos feeds on reaction. Read that again. Chaos feeds on reaction. Drama needs participation. Manipulation needs response. Provocation needs emotional movement. When you stay calm, quiet, and deliberate, you break the cycle. You do not give chaos the friction it needs to grow. That is power. Silence is not empty. It is loaded. And this applies far beyond conflict. It applies to plans. Many people speak too early. They announce the business before it has traction. They announce the routine before it has become identity. They announce the dream before it has developed spine. They speak because talking gives them a temporary feeling of momentum. But spoken ambition is not the same as built ambition. In fact, talking too much about your plans can weaken them. Why? Because words create the illusion of progress. You get emotional relief from being heard, and that relief can reduce the urgency to do the hard, boring work required to make the thing real. So learn this discipline. Protect what is still becoming. You don't need their permission. And you do not need their early validation either. Not every seed should be exposed to weather. Some goals need darkness before daylight. Some plans need protection before announcement. Some transformations need privacy before visibility. What you do not reveal cannot be attacked as easily. That's the key. And then there is emotional bait. Someone says something sharp, passive-aggressive, provocative, disrespectful. They want movement. They want your face to change, your tone to rise, your attention to lock in, your calm to disappear. And if it works, they learn something dangerous, that your state is available. But when you stay composed, when you say less, when you refuse to hand them emotional material, the balance shifts. Now they cannot read you easily. Now they cannot guide the exchange as easily. Now they do not know where they stand. This is why composed people are hard to manipulate. They do not leak enough. They do not answer every hook. They do not confess every insecurity. They do not react on command. That is not coldness. That is self-possession. You have a choice. You can keep making your internal state public, or you can start treating it like something valuable, something protected, something directed, something earned access to. That shift changes everything. And let's be clear. Silence is not just the absence of speech. Silence is the refusal to perform. You can talk very little and still perform. You can be quiet on the surface and loud in your energy. Real silence is deeper. It is calm. It is settled. It is non-needy. It is not begging to be recognized. It is not fighting for dominance. It is not desperate to be understood in every moment. That is why real silence increases presence. Because people feel when someone is not scrambling. They feel when someone is not trying too hard. They feel when someone is not leaking insecurity through endless explanation. They feel when someone is grounded enough to leave space in the room. That kind of person stands out. Not because they force attention. Because they do not chase it. That's the key. Leadership works the same way. Composed leaders do not speak just to fill the air. They do not respond to every little emotional ripple. They do not announce every thought the moment it appears. They watch. They listen. They assess. Then they speak with purpose. And because they speak less, their words carry more weight. That is leadership. Not volume. Precision. Speak when it moves the mission. Read that again. Speak when it moves the mission. Not when your ego wants relief. Not when your insecurity wants reassurance. Not when your emotion wants discharge. Not when the room is anxious and trying to infect you with urgency. Speak when it moves the mission. That means your words should do something useful. Clarify. Direct. Protect. Correct. Build. Close. Strengthen. If your words are not doing that, many of them are probably unnecessary. It's not about silence for appearance, it's about silence for control. That's the key. Here is the behavioral instruction. First, delay your responses. Not forever. Just long enough to think. When triggered, pause. When questioned, pause. When tempted to overshare, pause. When baited, pause. A pause protects power. Second, stop explaining plans too early. Work longer in private. Build more before speaking. Let evidence mature before announcement. Third, reduce emotional self-disclosure to people who have not earned it. Not everyone deserves access to your fears, frustrations, and dreams. Access should be earned, not assumed. Fourth, observe more than you broadcast. Watch patterns. Watch tone. Watch motives. Watch who talks too much. Watch who needs reaction. Watch what changes when you stop giving energy away. Observation sharpens judgment. Judgment sharpens action. Fifth, practice concise speech. Say what is needed. Mean it. Then stop. No padding. No performance. No nervous overtalking. Less words. More weight. That is power. Silence is not empty. It is loaded. What you do not reveal cannot be attacked as easily. Speak when it moves the mission. Repeat those until your behavior changes. Because this book is not teaching you to become distant for the sake of image. It is teaching you to become harder to drain, harder to read, harder to provoke, and harder to control. Silence helps you do that. Silence protects your state. Silence protects your plans. Silence protects your energy. Silence protects your edge. And once you learn to use silence correctly, you stop confusing expression with strength. You stop pouring yourself into every room. You stop reacting just because there is an opening to react. You begin to move with far more precision. That is power. That is emotional control. That is not caring about what never deserved access to your inner world in the first place. You have learned to react less, seek less approval, explain less, prove less, fear less judgment, and say less without losing presence. Now one final lesson remains. The ultimate test is not whether you can handle the big things. It is whether you can stop letting the small things own your peace. Chapter 10. Become untouchable by trivial things. Most people do not lose because life is too hard. They lose because they are too easily disturbed. A delay ruins the mood. A comment ruins the hour. An awkward moment ruins the day. A small mistake ruins the confidence. A minor inconvenience ruins the rhythm. A little disrespect ruins the focus. And when that keeps happening, the person starts calling it stress, bad luck, difficult people, a hard season, a cursed life. No. A lot of the time, the real problem is simpler. You keep making small things heavy. That's the key. Greatness is often less about adding more and more. More hacks. More plans. More routines. More intensity. More effort. More control. And more about being disturbed by less and less. That is maturity. That is emotional control. That is power. Small things only own you when you enlarge them. Read that again in your mind. Small things only own you when you enlarge them. A delay is a delay. A bad mood is a bad mood. A missed call is a missed call. A rude tone is a rude tone. A mistake is a mistake. An awkward interaction is an awkward interaction. But then the undisciplined mind gets involved. Now the delay becomes, everything is going wrong. Now the missed call becomes, they do not respect me. Now the awkward moment becomes, I always embarrass myself. Now the criticism becomes, maybe I am not good enough. Now the bad day becomes, my whole life is off track. This is how trivial things become powerful. Not because they are powerful. Because you feed them story, attention, and emotion until they grow larger than they were. That's the key. The mind is a multiplier. Whatever you feed, it expands. Feed a small irritation, and it becomes a cloud over the whole day. Feed a small fear, and it becomes hesitation. Feed a small wound, and it becomes identity. Feed a small inconvenience, and it becomes an excuse. You have a choice. You can keep enlarging every disruption. Or you can start reducing everything to its true size. That is discipline. Do not promote minor problems into major identities. That line matters. Do not promote minor problems into major identities. A bad day does not mean you have a bad life. A bad meeting does not mean you are bad at your work. A rough conversation does not mean the whole relationship is broken. A missed opportunity does not mean you are cursed. A moment of doubt does not mean you are weak. But weak minds do this constantly. They turn moments into definitions. They turn inconvenience into evidence. They turn temporary emotion into permanent self-concept. That is how people become fragile. Not because life is always crushing them. Because they keep handing life extra weight. Look at how often this happens. Traffic. You were calm. Then traffic appears. Now your whole internal state changes. Jaw tight. Mind racing. Irritation rising. Nothing productive happens. The road does not clear because you got angry. Your destination does not arrive faster because you lost control. So what was gained? Nothing. Only energy lost. A delayed text. Now you are building theories. Why are they taking so long? Did I say something wrong? Are they playing games? Are they disrespecting me? Hours of mental noise because somebody did not answer on your preferred timeline. Again, what was gained? Nothing. A bad comment from somebody irrelevant. Now it lives in your head. You replay it. You prepare responses. You carry it into your work, your home, your sleep. What happened? A small thing entered. You enlarged it. Small things only own you when you enlarge them. This is one of the final disciplines of this book. Not just controlling major emotional storms. Controlling the tiny leaks. Because a life gets ruined more often by accumulation than explosion. One irritation. One resentment. One delay. One insecurity. One petty distraction. One little moment of ego. Then another. Then another. And eventually the whole nervous system becomes easy to disturb. That is not strength. Strength is stability in the face of the ordinary chaos of life. Not dramatic chaos. Ordinary chaos. The late email. The awkward silence. The unexpected bill. The wrong tone. The mistake in public. The inconvenience you did not plan for. Can you remain yourself through that? That is the test. It's not about perfection, it's about proportion. That's the key. Proportion means giving things the amount of energy they actually deserve. Not more. The problem is not that something went wrong. The problem is that you gave it authority over your entire state. You gave a small event a large response. And once that becomes habit, your life becomes emotionally expensive. Everything costs too much. Every inconvenience costs peace. Every opinion costs confidence. Every disruption costs momentum. Every bad moment costs identity. No. That price is too high. You have a choice. You can keep paying emotional luxury prices for trivial events. Or you can lower the emotional price of everyday friction. That is what disciplined people do. They do not pretend nothing bothers them. They simply refuse to overfund small problems. That is emotional intelligence. That is self-respect. That is control. Do not promote minor problems into major identities. Let's make it practical. You spill something. You forget something. You get corrected. You get overlooked in a room. You say something awkward. You feel off for a day. You miss a call. You get stuck waiting. Someone is slightly dismissive. Something small does not go your way. What now? Pause. Shrink it back to size. Say the truth. This is annoying, not catastrophic. This is uncomfortable, not defining. This is a moment, not my identity. This is a setback, not the story of my life. That is how you regain command. Not by denying reality. By naming it correctly. And once you name it correctly, you stop feeding it nonsense. You stop rehearsing it. You stop dramatizing it. You stop turning it into a speech about your fate. You stop dragging it into tomorrow. Feel it briefly. Correct it quickly. Move on cleanly. That is the behavior. Not every bad moment deserves a bad day. Read that again. Not every bad moment deserves a bad day. And not every bad day deserves a bad week. This is where standards matter. The new standard is simple. Calm under pressure. Action without noise. Boundaries without guilt. Focus without apology. That is the person you are building. Not a numb person. A disciplined person. Not a passive person. A proportionate person. Not a careless person. A person who knows what deserves energy and what deserves dismissal. Unbothered is a competitive advantage. That line matters more than most people realize. Unbothered is a competitive advantage. Because while other people lose hours to pettiness, you keep building. While other people spiral over comments, delays, awkwardness, and small disrespect, you keep moving. While other people keep breaking rhythm over trivial friction, you stay on mission. That compounds. A hard-to-provoke person gets more done. A hard-to-distract person protects momentum. A hard-to-defeat person wastes very little energy on nonsense. That is why being unbothered is not some soft aesthetic. It is operational strength. It is performance strength. It is strategic strength. You don't need their permission to stay steady. You do not need anyone else to validate your boundaries. You do not need anyone else to understand your calm. You do not need to explain why you refuse to react to every small thing. You know why. Because your life is too valuable to be governed by trivia. That's the key. Here is the final behavioral instruction of the chapter. First, catch exaggeration early. The moment your mind starts turning a minor event into a major narrative, interrupt it. Second, speak in proportion. Describe things accurately, not dramatically. Third, return to function fast. What needs to be done now? What is still in your control? What deserves action, and what deserves release? Fourth, protect rhythm over emotion. A small disruption should not steal the whole day. Fifth, build the identity. Become the person who is difficult to bait, difficult to shake, difficult to distract, difficult to emotionally invoice for every little inconvenience. That is the final standard. Small things only own you when you enlarge them. Do not promote minor problems into major identities. Unbothered is a competitive advantage. Repeat those until they become instinct. Because this whole book has been about one thing: reclaiming your state. Stop reacting. Stop begging for approval. Stop explaining yourself to death. Stop leaking energy. Stop proving. Stop collapsing at rejection. Stop feeding drama. Stop fearing opinion. Stop talking your power away. Stop letting small things become large. That is what it means to master the art of not caring. Not caring about what is trivial. Not caring about what is manipulative. Not caring about what pulls you away from your mission. Not caring about what never deserved your emotional rent in the first place. And when you live like that, you become something rare. Calm under pressure. Sharp in thought. Clean in action. Hard to provoke. Hard to distract. Hard to defeat. You have a choice. Stay available to every little thing, or become untouchable by what does not matter. Only one of those lives wins. You have learned the discipline. Now all that remains is the final challenge: to live it daily, without excuses, without drama, and without giving your power back. Now you understand the lesson. Your power was never in controlling people, controlling outcomes, or controlling the world. Your power was in controlling what you give your mind, your emotions, your attention, and your energy to. Every time you stop reacting, you get stronger. Every time you stop seeking validation, you get freer. Every time you let people misunderstand you, reject you, doubt you, or criticize you without losing focus, you become more dangerous in the best possible way. Calm is not weakness. Detachment is not laziness. Silence is not fear. These are weapons of disciplined people. So from this moment on, Stop explaining, stop proving, stop reacting, and stop handing your peace to things that do not deserve it. Protect your energy. Guard your focus. Stay locked on the mission. And here is your challenge. For the next 7 days, let nothing trivial steal your state. No drama. No overreaction. No emotional leakage. Just control, action, and forward movement. Do that, and you will see how much of winning starts when you finally stop caring about what never mattered.